so many different ways in New York State and in government and in non-government, in religious institutions, in business settings. I was talking to Debbie. Where did Debbie go? I don't know where Debbie is. But I was talking to Debbie before about it. This is used universally in every single setting that you can imagine. We are honored and we are privileged, all right, to receive this training from Morton Blackwell and the Leadership Institute. These people down in Virginia have gone out of their way to make sure that you, Susie, Dave, every one of you are prepared for what's coming in front of us, all right, which seems like right now a Trump tsunami. All right? That's what it seems like. But underneath that is the Biden tidal wave. They're both going to crash. They're both going to crash. And they who are prepared.
Hey, good to see you. We live. Yeah, say something.
Will survive.
Yeah.
No one else.
Hello, everyone. I am.
All right? So, hear me loud, hear me clear. This is not the first training that we're going to get. This is one of about a half dozen trainings that are going to come over this year.
One. I'm going to be sitting over there. I want my food on that too. Because I'm going to be doing all the videos. Thank you. Appreciate it.
He's going to be our trainer. And you could give him his accolades and everything else later on. But right now, what's important for him to know is, have you signed in with him? Have you checked in? All right? Wilson, Steve, all you guys have checked in? Ed?
Yeah, I have one.
Ladies?
The pollo Madrid.
Checked in, raise your hand.
The chicken.
Steve will come around to you.
Come.
The same one?
Enjoy the dinner tonight. This is Marbella. It's their finest. All right? Have a wonderful dinner. All right? Have a wonderful conversation with the people at your table. But remember why you're here. You're here because, ladies, you don't like the way things go. Right? And you want to change. Right? All right? Now, you two young people are too young to realize, but when this country was developed, the way they settled their fights were muskets. All right? And these large, yellow, large balls of lead that they used to implant in people. Kill them. All right? We're hoping that here in the United States, current day, that doesn't happen anymore. That's why we want you to focus, pay attention, and try and get something out of this for each of you. It's that important. All right? It's that important. And now, without further ado, man of the hour, Steve. Yes, over here.
Thank you very much. Now, before I get started, I was on a plane up here asking myself how the heck I got in a situation where I was going to be up in New York, New York State. I am a fairly proud hillbilly from the Southern Appalachian Mountains in Northern Georgia. And I guess I ended up making a big mistake when I let my employers know that I knew not only how to use Robert's Rules of Order, but also how to teach it. So now, I get the privilege of going all over this great country and talking about Robert's Rules of Order. But before we get into that, just a little bit about myself. My name is Stephen Aaron. I am from the great state of Georgia. I've been involved in politics since 2005. I started when I was 14 years old. I decided to be a page for a state senator and got bit by the proverbial political bug, and it's been an addiction ever since. For those of you that have been involved in politics for a while, you know it's an addiction. But the thing is, I have been dealing with Robert's Rules of Order plug it into my middle school. And one of the things that we do, now the way that competition assigned different motions, and you had 10 minutes to run a meeting. And you got judged on how long you ran that meeting, whether or not you used the motions appropriately. So, I actually calculated it out. I have been using Robert's Rules of Order for 22 years. And so and this is something I am passionate about. But we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Now, how many of y'all have heard of the Leadership Institute before? Okay, we got a few. Real quick, we're going to go through a quick introduction of the Leadership Institute, who we are, what we do, and then we'll get to the meat and potatoes of the evening. Alright, so the audio was off on that video a little bit. We'll get back to that later. So, I'm skipping over that one because I made that one just for the state of Georgia where I'm from. So, we have had the opportunity to be in existence since 1979. And you can see here some of the notable people that you've probably seen on the news media, on social media, and different areas around the country. All of these individuals are Leadership Institute graduates. Now, this is not the entire list. The entire list of our notable graduates is much, much longer, but these are some faces that you may recognize. The Leadership Institute was founded by Milton Blackwell in 1979. Morton actually headed up Reagan's youth program when he was running for president. And he ended up getting appointed to the government by President Reagan himself. However, after a couple of years being in the official side of government, Morton realized that where his passion was and where his talents lay was in training conservatives to be more effective in the public policy process. So, he left the Reagan administration, went full bore into the Leadership Institute, and since then, this number is actually out of date. In the past 18 months alone, we have trained over 45,000 conservatives nationwide. That is more than in our first 30 years of operation. So this number is actually 294,000 conservatives nationwide since 1979. Now, as an organization, we do have an open admissions policy. Anyone that wants to walk into a Leadership Institute training can and obviously do. So we train people, and we do not support or oppose candidates. We do not oppose legislation. We are the true neutral in the conservative movement because we are simply here to give people the tools that they need to be successful. That is our goal. Now, as part of our organization, we have several different departments. One of these is conservative jobs. So if you know anyone that is looking for a job in the political arena, or if you're looking to hire people, conservative jobs is an excellent job board to be on. I actually got several jobs off of there before I started working for the Leadership Institute. And you can follow us across social media. We are always the Leadership Institute, no matter if it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Leadership Institute is who we are. Now, as a big part of this, we also have our Campus Reform Division, which helps to train conservative student journalists and help to expose the lies of the liberal left on campuses around this country. So if you have someone that's younger that wants to get accurate information about what's going on different campuses around the country, Campus Reform is the place to get. Now, this has to be what I think is one of the most important quotes from our founder, Milton. He says, "You owe it to your philosophy to study how to win." Now, to me, and this is my personal opinion entirely, this kind of harkens back to Scripture, where it says faith without works is dead. And in that same vein, we as conservatives need to be able to implement what we want and know how to win in the public policy arena, whether that's winning office or winning public policy victories. So you owe it to your philosophy to study how to win. It's a screenshot of our website, and of course, if you find today helpful and informative, the only reason that we are able to offer these trainings is through the generous support of our donors. We have a very generous donor base nationwide, so if you feel led to, please feel free to donate to the Leadership Institute. Do we have any questions about the Leadership Institute, who we are, what we do, any of that? All of that is clear as mud? All right. So, let's get into the meat and potato meeting. Yes, sir.
You said people graduated from the Leadership Institute.
Yes, sir.
What is the curriculum? Is there multiple other courses?
So we have all sorts of different curricula.
How were the graduates?
So if you stay for the entirety of the program tonight, you will actually be a graduate of the Leadership Institute. So let's get into what is Robert's Rules of Order. So this goes back the late 1800s. There was a gentleman who was a general in the Civil War by the name of Henry Martin Roberts. And do we have any engineers in the room? Any engineers? Okay. So I won't offend too many people when I say this. Engineers tend to have their own personality. Would you agree? And it's usually very methodical. So as an engineer and as a general in the United States Army, Henry Martin Robert went to church and he started getting upset by how disorganized his church meetings were. Now, Henry had actually had the opportunity and the ability to travel not just within the United States, but also throughout the world. He went over to Europe and sat in on sessions of Parliament. He watched the United States Congress as they passed legislation. And he was like, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, this should be available to the people too. And I think this is one of the reasons why I like Henry Martin Robert. He stole from the government. And he gave it to the people. And the whole purpose of the rules that he designed was to ensure that common people and average organizations could have the same standards, the same methods of efficiency that you generally tend to see in government. And his quote about it was, basing its general principles upon rules and practices of Congress and adapted in its details for the use of ordinary societies. I mean, you really get much more patriotic than that. Stealing from the government, giving to people, that sounds like a good person to me. So what is parliamentary procedure? And you'll hear me use parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules of Order interchangeably. They're not the exact same thing, but they all follow sort of the same general concept. So to begin with, it's rules that limit, guide, and protect the individual in an assembly. And it protects the rights of the minority. Now, understand that there will be words that are used tonight that are not as they're commonly used today. So whenever we're talking about this, we're talking about in a meeting. So when I say the word assembly, I'm just talking about a meeting. That can mean an assembly of 5 people or an assembly of 5,000 people. When I say the word minority, that's talking about people that are in the minority opinion or in the minority vote in that assembly. You hear me use the word germane. Germane means that it has to relate back to the original topic. And there are other terms that we use later on. And I think that this is probably one of the things that people get a little bit confused about Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure in general. Because there's a lot of people that try to weaponize Robert's Rules of Order against their opposition, which is a completely wrong way to do it. This is just a method of organization. It's a method of making sure that your organization is able to conduct business in an efficient and timely manner. Now, with that being said, though, everyone watches the U.S. Congress, right? How many times do they make good decisions every day?
Ah,
I think we
countless.
get the general idea here. But they make sure to follow the rules that they have set forth, both through parliamentary procedure and through the rules that they have passed to govern their individual body. So as someone that's participating in a meeting, it is in your best interest, not just for you, but also for your organization, to follow the rules that have been set forth. That doesn't mean that every decision that your organization makes is going to be the right one. But that if you make, it's not the decision that you must make that must be correct, but each decision you make that must be correctly made. If you're following the rules and procedures of Robert's Rules of Order, the bylaws of your organization, and any special rules you set forth, there can be no question as to who voted in the majority and who the majority opinion was. And that doesn't mean that if you're in the minority opinion, you have to be happy about the decision that's made. In fact, they give you an opportunity to come back in 6 months and say, told you so. But if you're following the rules, it makes people that are in the minority opinion feel like they haven't been walked over or stepped on. It makes them feel like, well, we were just on the losing end of this, so we'll do better next time. So make sure that you are using this as it is intended as a tool of organization. Now, there are 10 basic rules that really cover Robert's Rules of Order. And I apologize, it's a little bit hard to see it on this wall. But luckily, everyone will be getting emailed a copy of the slides. So, that doesn't mean you don't have to take notes. So number one, the rights of the organization supersede the rights of the individual. Now, for a lot of people, this may give you sort of a knee-jerk reaction that, oh, this isn't a good thing. But I want you to think about it in this way. If you are voluntarily agreeing to be part of an organization, whether it's as a member or an officer, you are agreeing to put the good of that organization ahead of yourself. So you are agreeing to go along with whatever rules have been set forth in their bylaws and with how that organization operates. So that is how the rights of the organization supersede the rights of the individual. But as part of that, all members are equal and all their rights are equal. You don't want to run into a situation where someone's vote has more weight and more authority than anyone else's. So this is founded around that basic principle of one person, one vote. And that is the equality that you get within Robert's Rules of Order. Order has to be present in order to do business. The majority always rules. This is essentially structured democracy at its best. So whoever is in the majority opinion in an assembly will be the one making decisions. Now this is the one that tends to get on my nerves the most. Silence means consent. I cannot tell you how many meetings and conventions that I have sat through where I have sat next to someone who stayed silent the entire meeting. They did not let their voice be heard, and then as soon as we get out in the parking lot, they start to complain about how things went. If you are silent during a meeting, even if your opinion is unpopular, you are consenting to go along with the majority opinion, whether you agree with it or not. But this is an opportunity in these meetings for you to have your voice be heard. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, if you don't let your voice be heard in meetings, and you don't state your opinion, you really don't have a right to complain, because you silently agree to go along with the majority. Wasn't expecting a call. Then you have the 2/3 vote rule. Any motion that limits the rights of people to debate, vote, or hold office requires a 2/3 vote in order to pass. One question at a time and one speaker at a time. Now, how many of y'all, like me, have been in a 3-hour-long, 30-minute meeting? I think that's a pretty common experience. But the whole purpose of the way that this is structured is to ensure that there is only one item of business in front of the assembly at any given time. Otherwise, it's just going to end up looking like a plate of spaghetti, and you're not going to be able to tell where one noodle is and the next noodle begins. One question at a time, one speaker at a time. Once a member has been recognized, this individual has been granted the floor and may not be interrupted by another member. There are a very few specific exceptions to that, with specific. The meeting chair may not put a motion to vote as long as members wish to debate it. The chair of a meeting cannot arbitrarily decide, okay, we've had enough discussion, it's time to vote on this. There has to be an active motion made in order to end discussion on specific topics. And I made the motion that dogs are the best pets in the world, and it failed. Everyone in here voted it down. I can't stand back up, and someone else can't stand back up and make the exact same motion that dogs are the best pets in the world. Because the assembly has already had their say on this particular topic. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be brought up at the next meeting, but it can't be introduced in that exact same meeting. Bonus rule. Personal remarks during debate are always out of order. Now, as I said before, I have been involved in politics for 19 years. And I can tell you, there are just some people I do not care for, that I have to interact with fairly often. But even a broken clock is right twice a day. And there are situations where I find myself on the same side with people that I really don't like. So, instead of doing things to try and undercut them, if they've got an idea that's good for an organization that I'm part of, it is my duty, it is my responsibility as a member of that organization to put my personal feelings aside and do what's best for the organization. And that includes not calling them a stinky doo-doo head and telling them to shut up. There's probably other words that can be used there, but I consider this to be a family setting. But you don't want any of your discussion or any of your motions to be about personalities, because that's not why you're there. You're there to conduct business on behalf of the organization that you're a part of. And if you're getting caught up in personality, if you're getting caught up in, you not liking someone, how is that going to help the organization that you're part of, or the business that you're trying to conduct? So you want to make sure that you are directing all your discussion towards the principles of the argument, not the personalities involved. And the easiest way to do this is if you're discussing, pretend there's no one else in the room. You are talking directly to whoever is sharing that meeting. And that is how you prevent things from becoming about personality. That is how you allow your discussion to remain above board and about the actual topic at hand. And you see this a lot in places like Canadian or the British Parliament, where whenever they stand up, they have rules in their house where they can't address anyone by name. They can only call each other the right honorable gentleman, the right honorable gentlewoman. And the only person that can actually use someone's name is the Speaker of the House. And usually when you do that, you're out of order. Because that's the last thing you want is to have your name called in Parliament. So, this is Robert's Rules of Order 12th edition. Now, this is a picture of it. This is also a hard copy of it. You can pick this up on Amazon for about $15 to $20, depending on who you get it from. So, everything we're talking about today is the short form of this. Now, I'm sure that there's a few of y'all that have taken Robert's Rules of Order trainings before, and the person who's giving that training probably was telling you to refer to, page 1247, paragraph 2, subsection C, in order to talk about a specific topic. That's not why we're here today. We're here to give you guys a working knowledge of Robert's Rules of Order. And the overall goal of Robert's Rules of Order nowadays is to take members, leaders, organizations, and turn members into leaders, leaders into organizations, and organizations into communities. And it does this through the process of efficiency. By facilitating business and cooperation, it allows this transition from just being a member of an organization to creating an entire community around that organization. So you have a lot of different organizations that use Robert's Rules of Order, that use some form of parliamentary procedure. Schools oftentimes use it, especially if you're in like a PTA or a PTO type organization. Different religious organizations use it. I know back home it's predominantly the Southern Baptist Convention that uses it for their church meetings, but you also have it in the Presbyterian Church, the Anglican Church. They use it to help make sure that their business meetings remain organized. Different youth organizations, FFA, Boy Scouts, Future Business Leaders of America. Insert your favorite organization here, you're going to find them using Robert's Rules of Order somewhere. Different government organizations. Now, I've seen this used a lot at county commission meetings, planning and zoning boards, and all the way up to the United States Congress. Different small groups. Different large meetings. Have any of y'all ever been to a shareholders meeting for a larger corporation? They're using Robert's Rules of Order, aren't they? And then conventions. Conventions are very similar to a lot of these larger meetings, but they're slightly different because they have a different goal in mind when you have conventions. These can be political conventions, these can be industry conventions, doesn't really matter. And then, of course, different professional groups. Think the state bar, the nursing association, the medical association. They are all using Robert's Rules of Order in order to conduct their business. So why do we use it? Well, first and foremost, to facilitate the transaction of business. That is the primary goal. That's the reason why it was created, is to make things more efficient. And this helps to promote cooperation and harmony. Now, I can go ahead and tell you, there may be cooperation and harmony, but that doesn't mean that I'm sitting in the back of the room and my face isn't as red as it's made because I'm so dang angry about a decision that's been made, or is going to be made. But through making sure the rules are followed, it lessens people's ability to get angry at the process, but they can still get angry at the decision. And they can still work through those situations to ensure that all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. You want everyone in the organization to feel equal to each other. And of course, to ensure that the majority has the right to decide, but the minority has rights as well. So just as a quick recap, parliamentary rules protect the right of the majority to decide, the right of the minority to be heard, the rights of individual members, and the right of absentees. Now, I bring up absentees because unless you have an organization that is only 4 people and they have the exact same schedule and you meet at the exact same time, someone's going to miss a meeting every now and then. So even though people aren't able to attend a meeting, as members of the organization, they still have rights. Some organizations, and it's mentioned in Robert's Rules of Order, allow proxy voting. You essentially get to make someone your attorney just for that particular meeting in order to vote on your behalf. Some organizations disallow it, but that's usually spelled out in the bylaws of each organization.
Question.
Yes?
Is that, do you have a proxy for a specific motion, or is it a proxy for the entire meeting?
So, how I've seen it used and how it's usually used in Robert's Rules of Order is it's usually a proxy for the entire meeting.
And then, but on the agenda has to have what we're gonna be voting for.
Correct.
You can't vote for something that's not on the agenda.
Sort of. We'll get into agendas here in a little.
Okay.
So, how I've structured this training is, think of it like you're building a house, okay? And this, I think, is one of the things that a lot of Robert's Rules of Order training lack. They jump straight into the motions you can use and how you can use them. But you don't know the why. You don't know why you use Robert's Rules of Order. You don't know why you have this process of organization. So if you know the why, you're actually better able to understand how to apply all these different motions and why it's important. Okay, before we get back into that, what do I got here? That is correct. This is a gavel. So what is a gavel? This is a symbol of authority. It is more than just a wooden hammer. I mean, I know that's what it looks like, and that's actually what it is, but it is more than just a wooden hammer. So, one of the things that was sort of instilled to me as a child, and I grew up during the Clinton era, so there were lots of discussions about disagreements with the occupant of the White House at the time. And I was taught that you don't have to respect the man that's in an office. You don't have to respect the individual that's in an office, but you respect the office itself. And you sort of run into the same situation when you're in a meeting. You don't have to necessarily like the person that's running the meeting, but you have to respect the guy. You have to respect the fact that the organization that you're part of trusted that person enough to put them in charge of the meeting and to make sure business is being carried out correctly. But with that being said, we're all human. Chairmen can make mistakes. And there are ways to go about correcting them when they do make mistakes. But this is beyond just a symbol of authority. This is also a non-verbal method of communication. You generally see it on TV all the time, or in some meetings, but very rarely is it ever explained. So if I wanted to call a meeting to order, that is how I would communicate that I was calling a meeting to order. If I was issuing a ruling on something like, in the opinion of the chair, the motion passes. If I wanted everyone in the room to stand for something like the Pledge of Allegiance or a prayer. And if y'all got a little bit rowdy, so that's a lot easier and it's a lot more recognizable and jarring sound than trying to say, okay, everybody, let's settle down, let's calm down, let's get back to work. Just being able to do gets everyone's attention
You need
very
one.
quickly and makes people
For the
start
call.
quieting down. And that sort of leads us into the role of the chairman. Now, this is sort of beyond just the duties of the office that they hold. This is for them leading an assembly. Because the chairman of an organization is supposed to be the visionary, the CEO. But when it comes to running a meeting, they do have specific responsibilities. First and foremost, to maintain order. You don't want people talking over each other or screaming over each other. So they have to make sure that the rules of the organization and Robert's rules of order. It is also their ability to operate in an expedient and impartial manner. And I have chaired, but whenever I meet Stephen Eric as an individual, whenever I pick up the gavel, that is when I become Mr. Chairman. My personal opinions, my ability to participate in discussion, my ability to vote in the proceedings of that particular meeting are either limited or gone depending upon the rules of that organization. And it is my job, it is a sacred duty at that point, not just to maintain order, but to ensure that the will of the assembly is not my will as the chairman of the meeting, but that those that are voting have their will out. And I can tell you, there have been more than a few occasions where I have had to bite my tongue until it bled. But the organization comes before me as an individual. And I had to remain impartial and let the organization have their say. And it helps to remain calm and objective as part of that, at least outwardly. I can tell you there have been a few times where I've had to put on a brave face and a fake smile and say, okay, we're moving on to the next one. But if the chairman of that meeting is not calm, they're not objective, then they are contributing to disunity. They are contributing to a lack of order in that meeting because they are allowing their emotions to be transmitted to those in the assembly. And it actually ends up causing more problems than not. And that actually moves on to focusing the group and not allowing irrelevant discussion. If the motion on the table is that dogs are the best pets in the world, you shouldn't be entertaining a discussion about how snakes are the best pets in the world. You need to keep it on topic. You need to keep it germane. And this is what I consider to be sort of the most overlooked role of the chairman, to provide clarification. As chairman of an organization or as chairman of a meeting, you need to know the ins and outs of every aspect of the business at hand and be able to provide clarification without giving your opinion. Whether that's clarification on Robert's rules, clarification for the motion on the floor, you need to be able to provide that clarification to your members so they can make the best decisions possible for the organization. And here's the hoping that it will work. So I actually went back and watched a series that I enjoy a lot. And I found a clip from that series that really, even though it's not talking about the chairman of an organization or even an organization itself, it really hits home sort of on how the mindset you want to have of someone that is filling that chairman's role. And let's see if it'll work. If not, I may unplug it from the big speaker and put it on my Bluetooth speaker. Alright, let's do this just one second. Maybe slightly harder to hear on this.
Dearest Lilibet, I know how you loved your papa, my son, and I know you will be as devastated as I am by this loss. But you must put those sentiments to one side now, for duty calls. The grief for your father's death will be felt far and wide. Your people will need your strength and leadership. I have seen 3 great monarchies brought down through their failure to separate personal indulgences from duty. You must not allow yourself to make similar mistakes. And while you mourn your father, you must also mourn someone else. Elizabeth Mountbatten, for she has now been replaced by another person, Elizabeth Regina. The 2 Elizabeths will frequently be in conflict with one another. But that is
So, in essence, when you're sharing an organization, the organization, even if it's something that you just, as an individual member of that organization, if you are chairing that meeting, it is your duty and responsibility to put your sentiments aside and support it, and everyone else is following the rules. So here we get into the individual meeting. The biggest thing, arrive early and start meetings on time. You need to be respectful of other people's time. And if you're the person that calls the meeting, and you're the person that's running that meeting, you're going to have a whole lot of angry people. This goes back to respecting people's time. If you know people may or may not have a report, or it's people that usually give a report, you want to contact them ahead of time to make sure. Because if they don't have a report, just take them off the agenda, skip over them, and don't worry about wasting people's time. Now, I touched on this earlier. Being familiar with the procedural rules of the bylaws, the standing rules, and the customs of the group, as well as from the procedure. Now, customs of the organization actually become very important. You know, I told you earlier that I was in Future Farmers of America growing up. And as part of the culture of that organization, we started every meeting with what was called the opening ceremonies. Now, these opening ceremonies were written back in the 30s, and it wasn't very long, but what it was is it was a scripted piece where every officer went through their duties to the organization before we were actually able to start the meeting. Now, you probably wouldn't see this in an adult organization. But when you have, you know, one meeting you can have nothing but new members, and another meeting where it's nothing but old members, you never know what you're going to get. So this helps those that are new or visiting the organization understand the structure, who they can go to with ideas or problems or business items, and what those responsibilities are. So you need to make sure you're well versed in that culture as part of it. And of course, clarifying motions and votes. Now, Robert's Rules of Order really only mentions 2 officer positions that are required in order to conduct a business meeting. One is the chairman, the other one is the secretary. And for good reason. You can't just have a business meeting and not take any record of it. Because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. At that point, it's hearsay. So it is the responsibility of the secretary to record, review, revise, and return the minutes of the organization to their appropriate body. That way, and this falls into the rights of absentees as well. You know, if you miss a meeting, you want to know what went on at the last meeting, you read the minutes. This is the best way to ensure continuity and good record. They also need to assist the chairman with the preparation and dissemination of the agenda. Now, the secretary may have all sorts of record-keeping responsibilities. I have seen organizations where membership, attendance, duties, and special assignments are all farmed out to different officers in that organization. But their primary duty is the minutes. And minutes are extremely important. They constitute a permanent legal record of a meeting. They can be pulled into court, they can be subpoenaed. I'm sure that over the years, a lot of us have seen different people at corporations that have gotten brought up on embezzlement charges and all sorts of other nasty stuff. And while it may not be the primary piece of evidence, one of the first things the law enforcement is going to look at is the minutes of different meetings within that organization to see if that individual had the authority to make the decision that they made. And if they didn't have that authority, things just got a whole lot worse for them. So there are things that you want to record in your minutes. Because they're a legal record, you need to have a good amount of details, but you don't want them to be overly detailed. And as part of the papers that are there on the table, I've provided a sample set of minutes. And when I send out the slides, I'll also send this in a digital format as well for you as well. So the things you want to record in the minutes: the kind of meeting, the name of the organization, the date and the place of the meeting, the presence of the chairman and the secretary or whoever may be standing in for them if they cannot be present, the presence of a quorum, the time that the meeting was called to order, and whether or not the minutes of the previous meeting were approved or corrected. You also want to record all adopted or defeated motions, the names of all members that are giving reports, that includes committee chairman, the names of people that were elected or appointed to positions, and the number of votes on each side in a ballot or counted vote. So, let's do this real quick. The motion on the floor is that dogs are the best pets in the world. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Nay. All right, in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. That would be recorded as a voice vote. Now, if there were more people saying yay, that would have been recorded in the minutes as being unanimous. But in a counted vote, let's do it this way. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, all those opposed? So, in an 18 to 20 vote, that motion would have failed. But that 18 to 20 vote would need to be recorded in the minutes of that meeting to ensure that people knew who actually was in the majority.
What about the abstain?
Huh?
What about the abstain?
Well, you are not required to ask for abstentions, but if someone wants their abstention to be recorded, they can ask for it to be recorded. So what not to put in minutes? And this really seems to be sort of the bigger problem that I see when it comes to minutes. It's not people putting in too little information, it's people putting in too much information. So you don't want to put any discussion or personal opinion in the minutes of your organizational meetings. That's how your minutes turn into hours very quickly. And the last thing you need is a pamphlet that serves as the minutes of your previous meeting. On top of that, especially if you have a fairly contentious meeting and you record everything that everyone said, that can transfer that contention from one meeting to the next. And it can cause disharmony in your organization, and it can make people hold grudges and stay angry. And we're going to have people like that. You're going to have people in different organizations that are just always angry. But you want to do everything you can to try and minimize that if you can. You do not have to put the name of the person that seconds a motion. You only have to detail that the motion received a proper second. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that it is part of the culture of a lot of different organizations to record the name of the person that seconded a motion. So you can do it. There's nothing that bars you from it. But if you're looking at the minimum standard, you do not have to put that. Any motions that were withdrawn. If we had a motion on the floor that cats were the best cats in the world, we had 45 minutes worth of discussion, and someone stands up and they withdraw their motion and there's no objection to it, that 45 block will be missing from your minutes because the motion was withdrawn. And entire reports. Now, you can reference reports in your minutes. So let's say, you're having a convention, there's a nominations committee, you'll have a report that comes out of the nominations committee. You won't put that entire report in the minutes, but you will put it in something along the lines of the nominations committee made their report, see Appendix A for the full report. That is how you would reference that in your minutes. Now, corrections can be made at any time. I can say that I have been in meetings before where I have gotten bored. I started reading through the minutes after we've already passed them, and I found out that someone forgot to put an I, or they misspelled a word, or they had an extra comma. That stuff happens, and it's easily fixed if it's a simple typo like that. But after they're initially passed, they require a 2/3 vote in order to correct. So if there are any corrections that need to be made, you probably want to correct them when you only need a majority vote. So I've referenced this several times throughout the evening. Let's talk about bylaws. Bylaws are the governing documents of your organization. Now these go by different names. Bylaws, rules, constitution. These are just the governing documents for your organization. They detail the powers of the officers, the scope and the purpose of the organization. They provide boundaries for the membership, for the officers, and let people know what they can and can't do as part of that organization. Now they are legally binding. In most states, if you're part of an organization that has bylaws, they're going to have to be filed somewhere. Most corporations have bylaws, so they end up getting filed with their particular legal entity. I know that back home in Georgia, our political parties, even at the county level, are required to keep their bylaws on file with their local probate judge, so that anyone from the public can see the governing structure of that political body. So, with them being legally binding, they can be subpoenaed as well. So make sure that when you have an organization and you have bylaws as part of that organization, that people are following them. Because if someone realizes that someone's not following the bylaws, it can result in more than just consequences within the organization. It can result in legal consequences as well, depending on the severity of the bylaw infringement. And this is the one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize. Bylaws can override Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order sets a minimum standard in most cases. There was an organization that I was part of for a little while where in order to get a business item passed, instead of requiring a simple majority vote, which is 50% plus one, they required a 3/4 vote in order to get any business item passed. You can imagine how much that organization actually got accomplished. Wasn't a lot. But that sort of moves us into quorum. And quorum is extremely important. If you have an organization that has a membership of 56, but only 2 people show up to a meeting, is it fair for those 2 people to conduct business on behalf of that 56-member organization? So you have to establish a minimum number in which you can conduct business, and that is quorum. Now, the chairman, and I know we keep eating stuff on the chairman, but the chair should determine whether or not the quorum exists before calling a meeting to order. If that chairman does not believe that there is a quorum, then there's no purpose in calling the meeting to order, because the only thing you're going to be able to do is adjourn. But if you do have a quorum, then everything's good to go. Now, your quorum needs to be part of your bylaws. And I'll just use this as a good example. A few years back, I was chairman of my county political party. 24 years old. Now, I got in there, and funnily enough, I had never seen our county party bylaws before, which was a problem in and of itself. But when I got them, they were 1 page front and back. They did not provide any details about the duties of different officers. It didn't detail quorums. It didn't really detail anything other than, hey, here's an organization and here's the officers. So I had to rewrite our bylaws. Now, as part of the structure of my county political party, we're supposed to have 3 separate entities that make up that county political party. You have the executive board, which is the officers and the appointees. You have the county committee, which is the officers, the appointees, and the elected chairman of each voting precinct in the county. And then you have the general membership, which comprises everything. So I had to go in and establish a quorum for each one of these entities. Now, for the executive board, it was pretty easy. Just 50% plus 1. We had 7 people on our executive board, 4 people show up, boom, there's a quorum, we can conduct business. When it came to our county committee, though, things were a little bit different. Now, I understand that, I grew up in a very small town. We've only got 28,000 people in my entire county. But we had 13 voting precincts. And if any of y'all have been around political parties for a while, sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get people to show up even if they have time. And that was a situation we ran into. I think the most precinct chairs I ever had show up at a meeting was probably 7 out of the 13. And so it was because of that history that when we rewrote the bylaws, we decided if we put in a quorum, 50% plus 1 for the county committee, we'll never get anything done. Because either we have precinct chairs that have left their office or they just don't show up. So we set the quorum for that particular extension of the county party at 25%, which actually helped out a lot with getting business done, but it also gave precinct chairs an opportunity to attend those meetings if they actually decided they wanted to get involved. Now, if quorum ceases to exist, there are only 2 motions that are acceptable. The first is the motion to recess or recess. Now, I can go ahead and tell you, you do not have the power of the United States Congress where Congress can actually compel members to attend and send the Capitol Police out into Washington DC to track them down and drag them back into the building kicking and screaming. Unfortunately, you don't have that power in your organization. So usually when you lose quorum, the best thing that you can do as an organization is just adjourn and pass any unfinished items on to your next meeting. Because that's probably going to be the easiest thing to do. Just unless you can get someone to come back that would give you the point. All right. So at this point in time, I'm going to give everyone a 10-minute break. Go use the restroom, stretch your leg,